Hi, this is Forgotten Cello Music, episode 57. German violoncello playing had found unusual opportunities for expansion in consequence of the demand for numberless competent artists. This is the first episode in 2023 for Forgotten Cello Music. This year, I'm starting it off with Introduction to Germany in the 19th Century. This is based off of the wonderful book of history about the violoncello entitled The Violoncello and Its History by Joseph Wasielewski. In my reading, I'm all the way to the page 113. This is where the introduction for Germany begins. It's a good 15 pages of history about cello during that time. In this episode, setting the scene of cello in the 19th century in Germany, the father of the modern German school of cello playing, naming a smattering of cellists, my own experience with some of these cellist composers. As far as setting the scene, I'll just read a few quotes and maybe make a few comments about them. German violoncello playing had, during the second half of the last century, found unusual opportunities for expansion in consequence of the demand for numberless competent artists for the various princely households as well as for larger towns. Page 113. Wasielewski goes on to claim a high place of esteem to Bernhard Romberg, who already had been mentioned in the 18th century. If you go back in some episodes, you can find Bernhard Romberg has a separate episode too. This is in spite of the near disappearance from use in concert halls, but retained as useful works of instruction in the teaching studio. Says Wasielewski, amongst the cellists mentioned in the second part of this work, there were already some specially prominent personages to distinguish. The branch of art, however, to which this book is devoted first received a really important and sustained impulse through means of Bernhard Romberg. What Romberg did for the cultivation and perfecting as well as the fine manipulation of his instrument merits for him the appellation of founder of the German school of violoncello playing. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Romberg, look up episode 15. Here are a smattering of names that are not really well known, although cellists probably do know a few of these. These are Gultermann, Klengel, and maybe Schlemmüller, although that one might be doubtful. And then, of course, Romberg. The other names that are definitely likely to be known by cello students are Dotzauer, Lee, Schröder, Büchler, Kummer, and Grützmacher. I mean, these names have accrued such an astonishing number of etudes just between those names, and of course some others that I didn't name, that I don't think it's possible that you can study cello and learn etudes and not have a couple of these names in your set pieces from these composers, these cellist composers. There are really dozens more from Germany that Wasielewski mentions. Here's just a couple, or here's a list of some. Some you may know, some others probably not. There's Linder, Hegar, Heberlein, Fitzenhagen, Brückner, Becker, Jäger, Kraft, Linke, Böhm, Merck, and many more. Of those named, they probably represent cellists that were notable pedagogues. They wrote pedagogical works, methods, etudes, and some of them even some decently nice performance works. There's a couple of those mentioned that are actually included in that book. If you go way back in my podcast here, The Violoncellists of the Present in Word and Picture, The original title in German, Violoncellisten der Gegenwart in Wort und Bild. That is published in Hamburg, 1903. So the cellists that were included in that book were actually living during that time. Now, moving on. I'd like to reflect on some of the cellists that I've had a little bit more experience with, just to get this period rolling. This is a very significant period for me, and German cellist composers, to my surprise actually, feature quite heavily in some of my favorite music that I've chosen. And I guess I wasn't really, I didn't really notice it too much until I started reading the book by Wasielewski and then uploading videos. But no matter. From this forgotten cello music group that I particularly like are Gultermann, Klingel, and Schlemmüller. And there are some close others like Bruckner, not the famous composer. This is Oskar Bruckner. He wrote some very nice little pieces, and August Nülk and so on. Anyway, what has my experience been with these works so far? Let's take a brief look at some of the pieces I've played. And while I talk about them, I will be featuring some samplings from the music that I've recorded and is available to view on my YouTube channel. And that is found at Traveling Cello. Now, first off, let's just go with Bernhard Romberg, because in the 19th century, as Wasielewski says, he is the founder of the modern school of German cello playing. As far as Romberg's music is concerned, it is very curious that I don't recall being exposed to it, or it was not introduced to me until I had to teach one of his student sonatas. And this was after I was able to get a master's of music and started teaching as an adjunct teacher in a university. I did look into it briefly. I learned it, about 10 years after I learned that one sonata. I undertook a large dose of Romberg because of the episode 15 I mentioned earlier, and learned all 3 of his duet sonatas for 2 cellos, Opus 38. And it was a really fun, exciting week or two. I remember I decided I was going to learn all of the duets, 3 movements each. They're quite lengthy, and it was a great learning experience. But I discovered he has some very nice music, and not only that, it's quite useful, and it really does make sense. The way he made the fingerings, the bowings, the passage work, it's idiomatic to the cello, no doubt. So if you want to look up the duets that I've posted, go find something on my YouTube channel. There's a bunch of them there. Then let's go on to Gultermann and Klingel. Gultermann is a name I've known, and I think almost any cello student is going to know his Concerto No. 4 in G, whether you studied the Suzuki method or not. It's something that, as far as I know, every student plays. Some other students go on to play 1 or 2 other concertos by him. Now, I was not in that camp. My teacher only did this one Gultermann concerto for some reason, and I never knew that he wrote any other concertos. All I figured was that he randomly assigned this concerto as No. 4. Okay, that's a little bit stretching the truth, but you know what I mean. If you don't know about it or nobody tells you about it, and by the way, this was back in the days before IMSLP or internet as we know it. So Gultermann wrote 7 other concertos, and he wrote a ton of short works, and I have focused on him the most. I have found his works to be very interesting. I like them quite a lot. He wrote 5 nocturnes for intermediate cello, and then another set of 5 nocturnes for more advanced, although not that difficult, certainly not virtuosic. 3 sets of Tonbilder, and then a heap of other short works. Now, for Klangel, I think I knew about Klangel when I was in high school, but not really conscientiously. It wasn't until my freshman year in college that I had to get for my class, it was a prerequisite book, required book, for my first cello lesson. I had to get Klangel's, the scale book, all about technique and so on. And, you know, of course, at that time, International Music Editions, that was a huge publisher, and so he was the arranger or editor for a lot of editions. And then sometime after college, I was really stunned when I found out that he wrote a Passacaglia for solo cello on a theme by Schumann. And it is really stunning. Very virtuosic, very difficult. I did learn some variations in it. And also on my YouTube channel, the Sechs Stücke, or 6 pieces, also the 3 sonatinas, Opus 47. Really incredible student works. If you don't know these, go look these up. They are worth their time to learn. If your student is ready, or if you are a student, if you're ready to think a little bit more musically, a little bit more independently, then these 6 pieces, these 3 sonatinas are fantastic. Now moving on to some names that may or may not be known. Well, in terms of etudes, they're definitely known. Gutzmacher, Schröder, Ley, Büchler, Kummer. These are known, but you don't really pay that much attention to them because they're just etudes. Kind of dry. I mean, they do their thing. They can get a little bit old and stale because they're not very musical much of the time. You know that Alvin Schröder, 170 pieces, 170 etudes. Usually you buy it in a set of 3 volumes. I did buy all 3 volumes, and I got through 100% of volumes 1 and 2, and most of volume 3. And, they serve their purpose, no doubt. And I oddly enjoyed kind of reading through, but they do get a little bit old after a while. A lot of these cellists that wrote etudes did write actual performance music too, by the way, and lots of interesting music. Some of it hard to grasp, and some of it just kind of try a little bit like an etude, but they wrote music nonetheless. Well, that does that for the introduction of cello in the 19th century in Germany. It is a fantastic time. Like I said, this is probably my favorite section, maybe because they were just more active and they wrote in the romantic vein. But like all things in music, in cello playing, I like lots of periods. I like the Baroque music very much. I like the 20th century very much. I like music from France, from Italy, England, all over. As long as it's good music, I like it. Well, I'm pretty excited for the upcoming year. I will likely not be uploading too much over the next month. I'll be doing a little bit of traveling finally after 3 years. I'm very excited. But my hope is to bring it a few more regular episodes, and if the time permits, I do want to upload something while I'm traveling, maybe a quite short episode, or just to touch, to keep in touch with all the listeners out there. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to those who have emailed me and inquired, and just, it's been a pleasure. I've gotten probably half dozen emails over the last year, and just hearing from you and finding out who you are, who's out there listening. Some of you are interested in playing unknown or forgotten or neglected cello music as I am, and some of you want to do anything that's unknown out there 20th century or earlier, or 21st century and earlier, but as you might already have found out, my goal is to go all the way through the Wasielewski book, and moreover to stay in the music that's still in the public domain so far. That does it for this episode. Thank you very much. I do hope and wish for everyone, including myself, to have a good year 2023. Remember to play more forgotten cello music.